Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. We're diving into something I think you're going to find really interesting today, AI, and how it's going to shake up the future of work.
Yeah, that's a hot topic for sure.
We're looking at this article, Navigating AI's Impact, The Path to 2030. It's by Dr. McCoy.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that one.
Yeah, and it's really eye-opening. I mean, one of the things that really struck me is that it's not, some far-off sci-fi prediction.
Right.
We're talking about changes that are happening right now, like right under our noses.
Absolutely. AI is already changing the game, especially in creative fields, administration, and, professional jobs even.
And get this, the article predicts that all administrative jobs could be gone by the end of 2025.
Yeah, that's just a couple years away.
It's kind of mind-blowing. When you think about all the talk about self-driving cars, you'd think transportation would be further along in terms of, AI taking over. But why are those other areas the first to go?
Well, it all comes down to risk.
Risk.
Yeah, think about the consequences of an AI making a mistake. If a creative AI messes up a design, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
Same with administrative stuff.
Right.
But if an AI driving a car or diagnosing a patient makes a mistake, well, the stakes are a lot higher.
That makes sense. But what about all the people who are, living paycheck to paycheck? They can't just drop everything and become AI programmers.
That's a huge concern.
Yeah.
And Dr. McCoy really hits on this point. We need to figure out solutions, and fast.
Otherwise, we're headed for some serious problems.
Exactly. Social unrest, economic collapse, the whole 9 yards.
So what are some of the solutions that Dr. McCoy proposes?
Well, there's some pretty radical ideas in there. Things like shorter work weeks with full pay.
So people have time to adapt.
Right. Experiments with universal basic income.
UBI, I've heard a lot about that.
And community ownership programs where workers actually benefit from AI-powered businesses.
Wow, these are big changes. It makes you wonder if they're actually possible.
It's a massive undertaking, no doubt.
Yeah.
But as Dr. McCoy points out, doing nothing is not an option.
So this initial wave of disruption is really just the beginning.
Exactly. It's the tip of the iceberg.
Dr. McCoy talks about a 3-phase transition. So what comes after this initial wave? What's next?
Phase 2 is what she calls systemic adaptation, and it's predicted to happen roughly between 2027 and 2030. This is where AI's impact really starts to spread.
Okay, so we're not talking about, robots walking among us just yet.
Not quite. But imagine a world where AI is making almost every job faster, safer, and cheaper.
I can see how that would be great for businesses. But what about the workers?
Right, that's the big question.
Yeah.
And Dr. McCoy outlines some potential scenarios that involve some pretty significant shifts.
Like what?
Well, for one widespread, universal basic income might become a necessity.
Wow.
As traditional jobs become, less central to our lives.
Okay.
We might also see a rise in something called decentralized ownership, where workers have more control over AI-powered businesses.
Kind of like worker cooperatives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And our education system would need a complete overhaul.
How so?
Instead of preparing students for specific jobs, we need to focus on adaptability and lifelong learning.
Wow, hold on a second. Widespread UBI worker-owned businesses. This is starting to sound a little bit like socialism.
It's a common reaction, and Dr. McCoy addresses it head-on in the article. It's not about the government taking over, though.
Okay.
It's about using AI to empower people, to give everyone a chance to benefit from this new economy.
So instead of the government running everything, it's more about using technology to create a more level playing field.
That's the idea. It would be a fundamental shift in how we think about work, wealth, and our role in society. A total paradigm shift.
So this systemic adaptation phase, it's not just about jobs disappearing, it's about redefining our entire relationship with work.
Exactly. It's a massive change, unlike anything we've seen before in human history.
Okay, I think I'm starting to wrap my head around this systemic adaptation phase, but then what happens after that? I mean, does this all lead to a world where no one has to work at all? And if so, what do we even do with ourselves all day? What happens to our sense of purpose?
It's a great question, and it leads us to what Dr. McCoy calls the purpose crisis.
The purpose crisis. Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
But before we dive into that, maybe it's time for a quick break.
Sounds good. We'll be back in a few minutes to tackle that purpose crisis and explore what this all means for you and your future. So stay tuned.
So before the break, we were talking about these 3 phases, early disruption, systemic adaptation, and
that purpose crisis.
yeah, that's the big one. And it's really interesting because for so long, we've defined ourselves by our jobs.
It's true. You meet someone new, and what's the first question you ask?
What do you do, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And their answer tells you so much about them.
It shapes their identity, their status, their whole sense of self-worth.
But if work as we know it becomes less essential, How do we find that purpose? How do we define ourselves?
That's the heart of the purpose crisis.
Right.
Dr. McCoy argues that we need to shift from a work-based identity to a purpose-based identity.
Okay, but what does that actually look like? I mean, what are people going to do with all their time if they're not working?
The possibilities are endless, really. It's about finding meaning and fulfillment outside of the traditional job.
So, like what? Give me some examples.
Well, imagine having the time to really invest in your community.
Mhm.
Volunteering, starting a local initiative.
Okay.
Maybe you finally have time to pursue those creative passions you always put on hold. Painting, writing music, starting a YouTube channel even.
Right. Without the pressure of needing a job to survive, people could actually explore their passions, maybe even discover hidden talent.
Exactly. And let's not forget about relationships. With more free time, people could focus on connecting with family and friends, building stronger communities.
This is starting to sound pretty good, actually. Less work, more time for things we enjoy.
It's a different way of thinking about life, for sure.
But what about people who love their work? I mean, some people find a lot of meaning in their jobs.
And that's totally valid. Dr. McCoy acknowledges that not everyone will experience this as a crisis. Some people will still find fulfillment in their work, even if it's not driven by, needing a paycheck.
So maybe it's not about work disappearing entirely. It's about having the freedom to choose how we spend our time and energy.
Exactly. Whether it's pursuing a passion, contributing to our community, or simply enjoying the things that bring us joy.
Okay, that makes sense. So this purpose crisis, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's more like a transition.
Right, a shift in perspective.
Mm.
And it leads us to the third phase in Dr. McCoy's article, the new economic framework, which is predicted to happen between 2031 and 2035.
Okay, so what does this new economic framework look like? Does money become obsolete?
Not quite, but it does involve some pretty radical changes.
Like what?
We're talking about a world with universal basic income as the standard decentralized ownership of businesses becoming more common,
Mm-hmm.
and new social contracts that reflect this new relationship with work.
Wow, this is all very big picture stuff. But let's get practical for a minute. What can people listening actually do to prepare for these changes?
That's where Dr. McCoy's 7 key takeaways come in.
7. Okay, let's hear them.
Number 1, build multiple income streams.
So don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Diversify your income sources.
Got it. What's number 2?
Strengthen community ties.
Community ties. How does that help in an AI-driven world?
Because as these economic and social models shift, having a strong support network will be crucial. It's about resilience and collaboration.
Makes sense.
What's next?
Invest in personal development.
Meaning,
Focus on soft skills, communication, problem solving, creativity, emotional intelligence. The things that AI can't replicate.
the human touch.
Exactly. Number 4 is stay informed.
Informed about what?
AI is constantly evolving, so
Yeah.
you got to stay up to date on the latest developments, trends, and potential impacts.
Read articles, listen to podcasts like this one.
That's the idea. What's number 5?
Okay, you're on a roll. Let's hear it.
Engage in local economic initiatives, especially those that promote community-based ownership.
So like joining a cooperative or supporting a locally owned business.
Exactly. Take ownership of your local economy.
Number 6.
Prepare for reduced work hours by leveraging AI to your advantage.
So instead of fearing AI, we can use it as a tool to make us more efficient.
Right. Think of it as your personal assistant, helping you work smarter, not harder.
And finally, number 7.
Redefine your sense of meaning and purpose beyond work.
That's a big one. And it goes back to the whole purpose crisis thing. But how do you actually do that?
It's a personal journey, but Dr. McCoy suggests asking yourself some key questions. What are your passions? What brings you joy? What kind of impact do you want to make on the world?
Those are great questions to contemplate. But I have to bring up a very real concern that I'm sure a lot of people listening are thinking right now. This all sounds great in theory, but what about the practical side of things? How can people even think about investing in any of this when they're living paycheck to paycheck? It feels like a cruel joke almost.
That's a really important point, and I think it's something we need to address head on.
Okay, so how do we reconcile these big ideas with the day-to-day realities of making ends meet?
Dr. McCoy actually dedicates a whole section of the article to addressing this very question.
Oh, really? Okay, I'm all ears. What does she say?
Well, one idea she proposes is the creation of community investment pools.
Community investment pools. What are those?
Basically, it would allow people to pool their resources, even small amounts, and invest collectively in things like local businesses or community-owned projects.
So it's like a crowdfunding approach to investment.
Yeah, kind of. It's about leveraging the power of community to make investment more accessible.
I like that. What else does she suggest?
She also talks about micro-investing platforms. These platforms allow people to invest very small amounts of money regularly, often through apps on their phones.
So even if you can only spare a few dollars a week, you can still start building a portfolio.
Exactly. It's about making investing less intimidating for everyone.
This is good stuff. But does Dr. McCoy get into any more futuristic solutions?
She does. She
Mhm.
even explores the concept of mass tokenization of assets and businesses using blockchain technology.
Okay, remind me what tokenization is again.
Imagine owning a tiny piece of a local bakery or a solar farm or even a tech startup, all through digital tokens. You'd have a share of the ownership and potentially benefit from the profits.
Fractional ownership powered by blockchain. I'm starting to get it. It sounds pretty cool, actually. Does she have any other futuristic ideas?
Well, she also discusses the potential of artificial general intelligence, or AGI, to develop investment strategies that ensure fair access for everyone, even those without any prior experience.
AGI. That's the super intelligent AI, right?
Yeah, basically an AI that can perform any intellectual task that a human can.
So she's suggesting that this AGI could help manage investments in a way that benefits everyone.
Exactly. It's a bold idea,
Yeah.
and it would definitely require careful consideration. But it highlights the potential for AI to be used for good.
It seems like a lot of these solutions rely on using technology to create a more equitable and accessible future.
That's a great observation.
Hmm.
And it brings us back to that fundamental question. Is AI a threat or an opportunity?
It's the question everyone's asking, and there's no easy answer.
It's not black and white. AI has the potential to disrupt our lives in ways we can't even imagine. But it also has the potential to solve some of our biggest problems.
We've seen both sides of the coin in this deep dive, the potential for job displacement, the anxieties around the purpose crisis, but also the possibility of a world with more freedom, more creativity, and more opportunity.
Exactly. It all depends on how we choose to develop and implement these technologies.
Which is why it's so important to have these conversations now, to explore the potential benefits and risks, and to actively shape the future we want to create.
I completely agree. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the final takeaway? What should our listeners be thinking about as they go about their day, knowing that these massive changes are coming?
I think the most important message is this: be informed, be engaged, and be proactive. Don't just sit back and watch these changes happen. Get involved, ask questions, and use your voice to advocate for the kind of future you want to see.
Absolutely. It's not about blindly embracing technology, but about critically examining its potential impact and working together to ensure that it benefits all of humanity.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We talked about the potential for AI to disrupt the job market, the challenges of finding purpose in a world where work is less central, and some practical steps you can take to prepare for these changes.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
I agree. And I want to thank you for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to the deep dive. So before the break, we were talking about how to, prepare for this AI-driven future. But there's a big elephant in the room, right?
Yeah, a lot of people listening are probably like, okay, this is all great, but I'm barely making ends meet right now. How can I possibly invest in any of this?
Exactly. It's like we're supposed to be getting ready for this future where work isn't so central to our lives, but right now work is all-consuming just to survive. It's a real paradox. And Dr. McCoy acknowledges that. She dedicates a whole section of her article to this very issue.
Oh, that's interesting. What does she say?
Well, one idea she proposes is something called community investment pools.
Community investment pools.
Yeah, basically it would allow people to pool their resources, even small amounts, and invest together in things like local businesses or community projects.
So like a crowdfunding approach to investment, but on a local level?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about leveraging the power of the community to make investment accessible for everyone.
That makes a lot of sense. I like that. What else does she suggest?
She also talks about micro-investing platforms. These platforms let you invest very small amounts of money regularly.
Oh, I've heard of those. You can do it right from your phone.
Exactly. So even if you can only spare a few bucks a week, you can still participate.
This is great stuff. But does Dr. McCoy get into any more like futuristic solutions?
Oh, she does.
Yeah.
She even explores the idea of mass tokenization of assets and businesses using blockchain.
Okay, now remind me what tokenization is again.
Imagine owning a tiny piece of a local bakery, or a solar farm, or even a tech startup. You'd have a share of the ownership, and you could potentially benefit from the profits.
So it's like fractional ownership, but using blockchain technology. That sounds pretty cool, actually. Any other futuristic ideas?
Well, she also talks about the potential of artificial general intelligence, or AGI, to develop, really sophisticated investment strategies that ensure everyone has a fair shot.
AGI, that's the super intelligent AI, right?
Right. Basically, an AI that could do anything a human can intellectually.
So she's suggesting that this AGI could help manage investments in a way that benefits everyone.
Exactly. It's a pretty radical idea, but it highlights the potential of AI to be used for good.
I'm noticing a theme here. It seems like a lot of these solutions involve using technology to create a more equitable and accessible future.
It's true. And it all comes back to that big question, is AI a threat or an opportunity?
I think it's both, honestly.
Yeah, it's not a simple answer.
Mm.
AI could disrupt our lives in ways we can't even imagine, but it could also help us solve some of humanity's biggest problems.
It really feels like we're at a crossroads. And the choices we make today will determine what kind of future we create.
Absolutely. That's why it's so important to be informed, to be engaged, and to be proactive.
Yes.
Don't just sit back and watch this happen. Get involved. Ask questions and use your voice to shape the future you want to see.
It's not about blindly embracing technology. It's about critically examining its potential and making sure it benefits everyone.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from the potential of AI to disrupt the job market, to the challenges of finding purpose in a world where work might look very different, and some practical steps you can take to prepare.
It's been a great conversation.
I agree. Thank you so much for joining me.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. We hope this has given you some food for thought about the future of work and the role AI will play in all our lives. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.